This video will have two parts to it. The first, shorter part that will encourage a new viewer of Attack on Titan to watch the series the way I propose by watching to episode 80 and then skipping to 87 and ending it there. The second part of this video is to back up why I think the first time viewer of the series should watch it that way, and to do that, I will have to spoil the ending. Attack on Titan is a manga series written and illustrated by Hajime Isayama on September 9th of 2009. The anime adaptation was produced by Wit Studio and directed by Tetsuro Araki. The first season of the anime aired in Japan between April and September of 2013. Attack on Titan is the most intense and thrilling anime series of the past decade. If you haven't seen the show yet, you're in for a wild ride. Attack on Titan takes place in a world where humanity has been pushed to the brink of extinction by giant human-like creatures called Titans. These Titans have no apparent reason for attacking humans, and their goal only seems to be to devour them. The story follows a young boy named Eren Yeager who vows to take revenge on the Titans after watching his mother be devoured in front of him. Sorry, spoilers, but it happens in the first episode, and let's be real. It's a dark anime series and the protagonist's mother's hair looks like this? Of course she's going to die. The show is a roller coaster of emotions as you watch Eren and his friends Mikasa and Armin fight to survive in a world where death is always looming. But the show is not just about mindless action, as you'll find yourself constantly questioning the government, the true nature of the Titans, and characters' motivations. One of the things that sets Attack on Titan apart from other anime series is the depth of its world building and complexity of its characters. The show explores themes such as the cost of freedom, the nature of humanity, and the dangers of blindly following authority. As the story progresses, you'll find yourself becoming deeply invested in the characters and their struggles. You'll cheer for their victories and grieve for their losses. And when it comes to how you should consume this amazing series, it is in my opinion best to watch the anime up to episode 80, and then when you're done with that episode, to skip to 87 and finish it there. I have personally watched the series around a dozen times, each time experimenting with where I stop watching. My first time through the series, I watched it once a week as it came out until the ending of Season 4, Part 2, where I couldn't contain myself anymore and read what was left of the series in manga form. And let's just say, when I learned what happens in the manga after the show, I was so disappointed. Now I know I'm just some stranger on the internet telling you what to do, so I know you already object to what I'm saying. And I know it's hard, but I have to ask you to trust me. I'm not saying you should never go back and watch what I suggest you skip, but with the knowledge I have, I want you to enjoy the series to its peak and exist in that space where the show is borderline perfect and you can die happy. Well, at least that's how I felt. If you still can't trust me, then all I can do is for you to show this whole video to a friend who has seen the series. And if the rest of this video can convince them, then hopefully it can convince you too. Alright, the ending. Why do I suggest to everyone that they stop the series when there is still so much left to see? To keep it short, ending the series at episode 87 is the solution to the problem that is the ending. It's finding what's best with what we have to make a satisfying conclusion to this amazing story. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how I would have liked it to end if I had written it, or that you should go and read some fan ending and pretend that that's the real ending. I think Isayama had captured lightning in a bottle with the story he was telling around the climax of AOT that was the start of the rumbling. The string of episodes from around 75 to 80 are the greatest episodes in the series aside from some iconic moments in Season 3, and was the peak of the series as a whole, so it would only feel natural to end the show right there. Allow me to take you through what it was like to watch the series like I am suggesting. Everything happens as you remember. After the hardest battle of their lives, mass amounts of sacrifices were made, but they found what they were looking for. The basement. The secret of the world and a new objective for what was once known as the rest of humanity and is now known as subjects of Ymir on Parody Island. After 4 long years, Eren is within the continent of Marley, living undercover. And as soon as the world declares war, his assault begins. More death and destruction continues, but we are all left to wonder why Eren chose to go on his own and then force his comrades into that battle. Ever since the end of Season 3, Eren had been different. We don't know his motivations anymore. Hell, we didn't even know what he looked like until his reveal. In fact, the focus of the show doesn't seem to be on him anymore. Eventually, we learn more of what is happening. Eren has joined Zeke in his plan to euthanize all Eldians, gain the power of the Founder, and position Parody in a way that its people can die slowly. We feel betrayed by Eren. and wonder what is really going on, if there is a bigger plan going on in the background. At this point, we've all seen enough Attack on Titan to not take everything at face value. And when Marley comes for revenge, the final battle takes place. Characters we've been with since the beginning fighting in an all-out battle, our minds being blown with every new episode and every twist and turn. And then... Eren reveals his true intentions to Zeke, and in Zeke's own attempt at saving Eren, unknowingly gives Eren the upper hand as he manipulates the past, so that Eren can have the power he needs now.
You have to stop, Eren.
For what is about to happen will be horrendous for mankind. Zeke tries, but Eren is not one to be bound by anyone, and with his determination, he races forward, all to speak with the Founder. The Founder was a young girl who grew up in a harsh world as a slave, and obtained godlike power just to continue to be a slave, because it's all she has ever known. She almost seems like the opposite to Eren. She's fine being stuck if it means she can have what she thinks is a happy family. Trapped in her mind and then trapped in a world of her own creation, forced to do the bidding of the royal bloodline for eternity.
I'll end it! Here and now! I'll put an end to this world! If you give me your strength! You're nobody's slave, and you're no god either! You're just a person! You don't have to serve anyone! You can make your own choices! This is your power! You get to decide! You've been all alone. Waiting 2,000 years for someone.
We finally learn of Eren's true intention, to start a full-scale rumbling and destroy the whole outside world. And with the conversations held in episode 87, his intentions are clear. He dreamed of an outside world where everywhere you looked was freedom. To have his friends live long, happy lives, and to save all of his people at any cost. And that's it. That's the end. A man turned monster with the same ideals that made him a hero at the beginning of the story to the villain in the end. Of course, people who see this will want to see more. So many questions. What about Historia's baby? What about what Eren said to Mikasa? What about her headaches? What happened to Zeke? Does anybody stop Eren? And if the series ended right there, these questions would have fueled the community for years. People would be debating what might happen after the rumbling, instead of debating if the ending is good or bad, like we've all been seeing. Unless, of course, the manga's subpar ending was a marketing ploy to get more people into the show before they change it and make it a perfect anime-only ending. But that's probably just me coping. Episode 80 is easily the climax of the story, and then 87 is perfect falling action and resolution and would purposefully leave questions unanswered. Because at the end of the day, most other questions don't need answered. The answer to all the questions I listed earlier is, it doesn't matter, Eren flattened everybody. How the Founding Titan had been presented to us in the series shows that if someone has full control over the Founder, that they basically have the powers of a god. And at the end of episode 80, we believe Eren to have that godlike power. And of course, the only way to have more story after that point is to strip Eren of that power. Now I will go into my reasons for disliking the ending, and how it fails as a satisfying conclusion in comparison to my proposed ending. After the climax, we get to see some awesome moments in the manga that do suck to miss out on, like a lot of the destruction of the rumbling and the final battle on the back of the Founding Titan, but it has equally as much bad, like Hanji's pointless death because of the miraculous survival of Flock, who got shot in the chest and then just hung on to the back of a boat for hours as they crossed the sea to catch up with the rumbling, and then also knows exactly where to shoot the flying boat to hit its fuel tank, but also hit it just enough that it's not all that hard to fix. In fact, it takes just enough time for Hanji to kill herself, and then they fix up the plane just fine. And don't get me started on how Falco just figures out he can turn into a bird. Wouldn't it have just made more sense to have Hanji, the Titan researcher, figure out that Falco might be able to turn into a bird? But all of that is aside the point that the ending is just a confusing mess of nonsense that doesn't reveal any answers to the questions anyone has, and downright ruins the character of Eren Yeager. So let's talk about the infamous chapter 139, and dissect the discussion held by Eren and Armin when they're in the paths. They opened their conversation with Eren coming clean about why he was so hateful towards his own friends and got into Mikasa's head. It was to push his friends away so that it would be easier for his friends to go against him. Eren then reveals that his plan was for his friends to stop him, and that the world would see them as their saviors. Which, let's be real, is not a great reason. Eren understands how the blind hate towards Eldians was ingrained in Marleyan culture, and even after all that, it was still an Eldian that did kill the majority of humanity. The show has taught us that people will act irrationally no matter what happened. For example, around the end of the manga, before Armin magically talks them down, the Marleyan soldiers who just saw the allies stop the rumbling pointed their guns at their quote-unquote saviors. Armin and Eren's conversation moves on, and Eren tells Armin that his plan is for the rumbling to kill 80% of the population. Eren begins his lengthy reasoning for killing 80% of the population as opposed to any other number by talking about the founder Ymir, where we saw her backstory and character shift back in episode 80. From that episode, we can deduce that Ymir was a slave her whole life, but deep down always had a desire for freedom, but strangely never for herself. But 2,000 years later, she led Eren Yeager to be the one that frees her from her self-imposed slavery, helping him to start the rumbling, and to completely free the Eldians, all the descendants that are still attached to her through the paths. But in the shocking twist of chapter 139, Eren explains that the reason she stayed a slave for those 2,000 years is because she loved Karl Fritz, her owner, her slave master, the one who forced her to have children. And because of that fact, she needed to have the rumbling kill 80% of the population to set the stage to test Mikasa, who, remember, has no real connection to the founder previously presented in the story, other than maybe the headaches. Ymir wanted to see someone who was so blindly in love with someone quote-unquote evil to validate her own choice. This plot point just does not sit right with me. It would make sense if she tested Mikasa before freeing herself, but I guess you could say she gets the same effect because she could look into the future and see what Mikasa's answer would be, but of course then she wouldn't have been able to see that, unless she was going to do it. So then she would be a slave to herself to be able to free herself, despite already knowing she wants to be free, because of what Mikasa is going to do. If that last sentence didn't make any sense, then you see my point. But alas, during Eren and Armin's conversation, Eren doesn't know what Mikasa does. But then he immediately contradicts this by saying he saw the result of her choice, which we presume to be his own death and the ending of the Titan Curse. This is followed by Eren explaining that the Founder's power messes with his head and forces Eren to move forward. So in combination, makes him a slave to Ymir, but attempts to not fight it because of the conclusion of events he saw. And then out of nowhere, and for no other reason other than to show how much of a slave Eren is to the Founder's power, he tells Armin that he was responsible for his own mother's death by sending the Smiling Titan to his house to avoid her from eating Bertolt. This action to me is just something so out there for Eren to do, that I interpret the story differently than most. This is the ultimate sign that Eren has no control, and that every action he took after obtaining the Founder's power was not his own. Similar to the vow renouncing war, but Ymir's version. Of course, this interpretation might be wrong, but I want you to keep it in mind when I explain to you what Eren and Armin talk about next. Mikasa. Armin asks if Eren thinks that Mikasa will forget him and live a happy life with someone else. Eren answers, who knows, and then Armin punches him in the face and goes off on how Eren is disregarding Mikasa's love for him, and that it wasn't the right thing to do just abandoning her. This was kind of weird for Armin to do, but it may only feel that way because of the information we have and Armin doesn't. Like for instance that Eren lived out a fantasy world with Mikasa in the paths to live out the rest of his life. But that's also just it. Armin knows that Eren only has a few years left to live. So of course the reasonable thing to do is to hope the person you care about can go on to live a happy life without you, because you will be dead. But for some reason, Big Brain Armin, who mind you, is inflicted with the same curse Eren is, thinks that Eren's actions were unreasonable and that this is an important thing to bring up, despite learning that Eren is going to kill 80% of humanity, and that he was responsible for his own mother's death, and that his mind is being altered by having the Founder's power. This conversation just feels like Isayama needed to have the characters talk about Mikasa to try to drive home her importance, when in reality she was never all that important to this aspect of the story. It makes sense and was important for Mikasa to be the one who killed Eren in the end, but it wasn't to have her be the reason Eren was evil in the first place. After Armin goes off on Eren, he retorts in the most pathetic way. It's just one of those things, to remember this is the same Eren who stood in front of the sea, stoic, who had a gun pointed at his head, and he walked into it knowing he would not be killed. The one who had to talk with Reiner in the basement before body slamming dozens of Marleyan military officials. The same Eren who cried, saying he was useless as he watched helplessly as Hannes died, before standing up and facing the Titan who killed his mother. The same one with all the rage and power to move forward, doing all the horrific things he has done just to sit on his ass and say, "No, I don't want that. Mikasa finding another man. I want her to think about me and no one else for the rest of my life. Even after I die, I want to be at the front of her mind for a while. 10 years at least." After this outburst, Armin stands there shocked, calls Eren pathetic, then listens as Eren continues saying that his decision to flatten the world was something he was going to do regardless if he was stopped or not. And then my favorite line from Eren Yeager by far, in response to Armin asking why, Eren says, "I don't know why. I wanted to do that. I had to." This can have different interpretations, like Eren always dreaming of the outside world that was empty and open for exploration, or you can connect it to my interpretation that he was never even in control in the first place. So he doesn't know why because it's not his goal. He just feels like it's his goal when in reality he's just a puppet to Ymir. Eren's killer line is followed by Armin's best line in the series by far. "Eren, thank you. You became a mass murderer for our sake." At least this was followed by calling Eren's action an error, but it still feels odd. Lots of people hate this line for what it is, but I understand why Armin would say something like that, especially after what he had just talked about. Armin realized the events about to transpire are set in stone, and that this would be the last time he gets to talk with his friend. And to bring up my interpretation again, about how Eren is not in control, if Armin realizes this, then it makes even more sense that he would say that. Because it's not Eren's fault, he's just trying to let Eren know that things will be okay, and he did what he thought was best. This is perfectly summed up in the next panel and the last time the friends would see each other, when Eren says, "You can make it to the other side of the walls. Humanity will be saved by you, Armin." Of course, Eren doesn't know what happens after he dies, but I hope he thinks that Armin making it to the other side of the walls and saving humanity means that Paradis is going to be carpet bombed to the ground, and that the Titan curse will re-emerge, starting the cycle all over again. But for some reason, I doubt that's what he wanted. In fact, if Eren did see how things would have played out after his death, he would have chose to do something different. This is the crux of my interpretation, and the interpretation that I do think is correct, is that Eren was a slave to Ymir and had no say in what was happening. But although it makes sense if that's the case, I hate it. I hate it because I grew up with these characters and their struggles. I learned so much from the show that has been going on for a little under half of my life. Why would I not hate an ending that takes a character who has fought both tooth and nail, sacrificed everything so that he could reach his dream of freedom, just to not ever be able to obtain it in the first place? Maybe that was the point of the ending. That this is a sad series where things go bad and everything is sad all the time, and will continue to be sad in the future. If that's the message Isayama wanted to convey with these last chapters, I still don't think he did a good job. Again, this is based on my interpretation of what happened. I could be dead wrong, and the ending could mean something completely different than what I am seeing. I think the reason the ending was so unclear was because it wasn't what was intended. Do I know what was intended? No. But I do know that this whole story was beautiful, entertaining, and downright awesome. Up until episode 80 and then 87. So that's why I want new people to watch to that point, because I think ending Attack on Titan right there is so much better than reading to the end and either being upset with your own interpretation, or just being confused and trying to piece things together. But before I go, I just wanted to remind you of some of the awesome things about the ending that just put a smile on the face of all AOT fans. Like Mikasa kissing Eren's gross decapitated head. I'm sure someone out there finds this hot and they're happy they get to see it, but not us. Remember Historia? Me neither. But she had that kid, and it did just end up being some random farmers. But I hope Historia lives a nice happy life knowing that her inaction led directly to the genocide and deaths of 80% of humanity, and the eventual downfall of her own country. Because if you remember, Eren told her his plan, and she did nothing to stop him. In fact, she helped him by running off and having the kid. At least she won't remember it, because Eren said he would erase her memory of ever knowing she betrayed humanity. Well, until Eren died anyway, and her memories probably came back. Don't forget the last thing you saw of Reiner was him sniffing a letter. Sniffing a letter. And of course you can't forget Eren reincarnating himself as a bird to wrap Mikasa's scarf around her. I guess he and Falco are a lot more similar than I thought. And hopefully John doesn't find out the real reason Mikasa picked up bird watching in her old age. And I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it was great getting some additional pages, just to rub in the fact that all the hell the characters went through in a few decades' time would mean nothing as everything would be destroyed and the Titan curse would be reborn. Really just kicking Eren while he was already down, making sure that nothing he did meant anything.